Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Portnox. My name is Mike Marvin. I'm the head of marketing here at Portnox. Today, we'll be discussing how NAC, or Network Access Control, can help credit unions meet NCUA ACET standards. I encourage all of you throughout the duration of today's webinar to post questions within our question tab. You may see that to the right-hand side of the screen share. So just to start, a little bit about Portnox. If you're not already familiar with us, some of you may be. We were founded in 2007. We are a growing startup with about 600 plus customers worldwide. That spans North America, the UK and Ireland, EU, and the Middle East. And we've started to make a larger presence in Asia as well in the last few years. We have a global presence, as I've mentioned, with offices in the US, UK, and Israel. And we have an extensive set of global partnerships and channel partners that we work with, including resellers and distributors in basically every corner of the world. What makes us unique as a vendor is that we're solely focused on network access control. It's all we do. We're a pure play in that space, and it's our complete focus. And we like to think that we do it well. We are recognized in that industry alongside some pretty large players. And very recently, we won an award for cutting edge NAC by the Cyber Defense magazine as part of the RSA conference this year. A little bit about the history of the company beyond just the numbers. Back in about 2007, we came out with Portnox Core, which is a traditional on-prem network access control product that is still in use today. It has quite a foothold in many corners of the world, and we still have a growing presence there in terms of our customer base. As things began to emerge and networks kind of pushed the edge, and the workforce changed especially with COVID, for example, a lot of people working from home, working remotely, increased use of IoT devices, the embracing of SD-WAN, ZTNA, and SASE. Back in 2018, we rolled out Portnox Clear, which today remains the first and only fully cloud-delivered network access control solution. We work with quite a few credit unions in North America, both in the US and Canada. This is just a little sampling. West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, again in Canada as well. We have a pretty large footprint and growing footprint of credit unions that we work with in the continent. So as you guys are probably aware, data breaches seem to be on the rise. It's not a day goes by where we don't see some large news headline about a new ransomware attack or phishing attempt or something like that. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack comes to mind in the last month or so. What I think is important when it comes to network access control is to remember that 30% of those data breaches actually originate from internal actors. So we're often concerned about those from the outside getting in. But when it comes to network access control, we also want to validate those inside not being able to do anything malicious across the network as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on today. I think, what people tend to gloss over is the true cost of these breaches and what they mean for organizations, especially credit unions, which, range from very small to somewhat large enterprises, but typically have a fairly limited IT resource in-house that they can rely on to help mitigate these issues and deal with them hands-on. And in general, as we probably are all feeling, the majority of us are sensing that our cybersecurity risks are increasing as the days go on. And we'll talk a little bit more about how network access control plays into that and can fight against that growing trend. Again, credit unions aren't immune. They're just like any other organization. In the banking financial services world, and that's why today we're focusing on the new NCUA ACET framework, which has been recently rolled out in the last couple of years, and what that means for for credit unions with regards to the cybersecurity controls that they really need to have in place in order to protect themselves. So again, as we've said, many of you are probably familiar with the ACET's predecessor, the CAT. We've now moved to the automated cybersecurity examination tool, which really requires credit unions to meet a variety of baseline items across a variety of different domains. Today, we're really going to look in on domain 3, which looks specifically at cybersecurity controls, and we're going to show you how NAC ultimately can play a role in supporting the prevention, detection, and correction controls within that domain. We won't be looking much outside of that at all today. There's a lot to unpack in those 3 areas within domain 3, and we'll tell you a bit more about how NAC can ultimately play a role and help you guys really expand your coverage when it comes to domain 3 of cybersecurity. So why NAC? Today, as I'm sure many of you are aware that deal with network access control and other network security products, NAC today basically is used for a variety of kind of standard procedures or reasons that transcend just credit, what credit unions would use it for. That typically starts with device visibility and understanding exactly what's trying to connect to the device, from where, what type of device it is, and ultimately, what kind of risk. And when we say risk, we look down at the device compliance component. What type of risk that device poses to your network, and that's looking at things like whether antivirus is up to date, whether there is some kind of policy regarding the use of USBs connecting in, and things like that. NAC is also very commonly used for guest access management, and that's typically relating to on-site Wi-Fi usage, and also BYOD security. I mean, these days, many organizations, and maybe less so in the banking and, let's say, financial services area, allow for employees to use their personal devices at work, bring them in, use them from home to connect in via VPN and things like that. So it's not just making sure that managed devices are compliant, but also that those personal devices that will be in use are also compliant as well if they're accessing internal corporate resources. So today, as I said, we're going to look at domain 3 coverage. There's 5 domains that the NCUA has laid out here pretty explicitly. And when it comes to cybersecurity, the first domain and the third domain kind of go a bit hand in hand, but the third domain really dives into what can be done to prevent, detect, and correct issues going on across the network, when it comes to the devices and the different VLANs and those types of things. So if you guys want to learn more beyond this webinar, we have a whole page dedicated to this on our website. It's portnox.com/NCUA-ACET. And this will tell you a little bit more about how specifically our product, PortKnox Clear, our Cloud NAC, aligns with specific domain 3 cybersecurity controls. And I would urge you after this, to take a look at that. We, of course, will follow up with you all and send you this presentation, the recording, after the fact, and you guys can take another look at it there. So let's start first with the first section, looking at preventative controls. And that's really broken into 3 components within the NCUA ACET. That's looking at infrastructure management, access and data management, and device and endpoint security. Now, when we consider NAC and its typical capabilities, and we look at all of the different items listed across these 3 areas, it's pretty clear that NAC actually can contribute or meet about 50% of the requirements laid out in the ACET, which is pretty substantial. I mean, for one technology. So, those are things like firewalls being in place, making sure that AV is up to date, being able to remediate devices, say, automatically should those those two elements fall out of compliance per the risk policy of your organization. It also looks at whether ports are being monitored and whether there's encryption being used for wireless authentication. A step further is looking at the specific risks of devices and scoring those, actually having a scoring mechanism in place to be able to take action on the devices or assets that are connecting the network. I think when we look at access and data management, that's when we get into more of the identity of the user and the devices connected to that user. So it's employing some kind of role-based network access policy that's taking into account identification, typically through, say, MFA, let's say, and so it's taking a known entity or known user, employee within the organization, and being able to apply access policies to that person based on who they are, what department they work in, et cetera. And then at the end of the day, once that person's in, it's actually looking at the device or the endpoint, and it's saying, okay, what is this device or endpoint allowed to do? And what action can we take on it should it fall out of compliance? And I think those are such things as being able to restrict the removal of content from the network for specific devices. If you don't work in the finance team, one, you probably shouldn't have access to the finance VLAN. So you shouldn't be able to actually download or extract, content from that section. And then it's just generally being able to say wipe devices remotely. If say an employee leaves and you need to wipe a device and give it to someone new. And then it's the ability to patch devices should they need them, whether they're employee managed devices or even BYOD. So the second part we get into here is really focused on detective controls within the domain 3 cybersecurity controls within the NCUA ACET. In this area, we see a little bit less coverage, but if you think about it, building on top of the 50% from the preventative controls, you're adding another 30% of coverage on across the board in just this one domain alone. And so the detective controls look at things such as threat and vulnerability detection, anomalous activity detection, and event detection. And, there's some examples listed here. It's looking at, again, whether antivirus, anti-malware is up to date, whether those can be updated remotely, in a sense, remediating those devices. And then it's kind of the traceability of system access for individual users. Can that be monitored, and can access control policies be put in place? And that's where you're going to see NAC really kind of check those boxes as you go through these domains. And again, you extend that all over to event detection too. It's having processes in place, which you would with NAC, that would contribute to the monitoring of unauthorized devices, or being able to correlate events from multiple sources. And that's looking at different VLANs, for example, different types of devices, things like that. So NAC allows you to do that because it's giving you kind of a full network view of all the devices across the network based on location, based on the device type, and such. The corrective controls, there's really only one small piece here where NAC kind of plays into focus, and that's really patch management, and it's just being able to make sure that you can remotely effectively patch devices that need such work done remotely from a single location through your NAC platform. And you'll see, obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but products like Portnox Clear have that ability. And this is a smaller kind of coverage area, but when tallied up again, you're looking at about 84% coverage across the board in domain 3 when you just apply it to NAC. So in a sense, NAC is a critical component of the cybersecurity stack within your organization if it has not yet been employed. So let's talk about why Portnox. I mean, ultimately, this is a presentation we're giving today. We want to kind of apply what we do from a network access control standpoint and show you a little bit of why we're different. So I don't know how many of you out there today are well-versed in network access control products, hopefully somewhat. But you'll probably know that, many of the solutions, the legacy solutions out there, are quite heavy to deploy. They require a lot of different moving parts. For many credit unions with small IT teams, this will require consultants to come in and help. And not even for small IT teams. We work with customers kind of across the board, Fortune 2000 type companies that have to bring in outside professional services and experts that can stand up these tools. And some of the bigger players in the game that you'll likely hear are Cisco's Identity Services Engine, or ICE, and Aruba ClearPass, which are both on-prem solutions. And with these on-prem solutions, ultimately, you need to constantly upgrade them. Year after year, there's patches, there's upgrades, sometimes multiple times a year. When things evolve, you need to, and they're on-prem, you're going to need to spend that time, basically upgrading them. And what we hear mostly is that this is not something you can do in a production environment for the most part. You need to kind of go offline, create a sandbox, test that. Often takes several months. Things break. It's not something you can do on your live network without significant risk. Again, it's on-prem. You're going to need multiple, probably on-site appliances, whether that's physical or virtual machines, to keep this up and running. And that ultimately adds to the cost over time. As we said, complex and often frequent upgrades. That can lead to network downtimes. That can also lead to, obviously, user frustration, and operational loss. And in this day and age, you can't really have your network down for any extended period of time and expect to, not to affect your bottom line. And at the end of the day, because you spent the time, the resources, and the blood, sweat, and tears to make these on-prem solutions work, you're ultimately kind of locked into that vendor. And in many cases too, with a Cisco or HPE Aruba, you may also have networking hardware in place. So you might be utilizing a suite of things that they have. And so, it's then hard to say get off of them and find something else that might be more convenient for you. At Portnox, we've really simplified NAC. It sounds cliche, but as a cloud-delivered solution, you're getting the latest and greatest service from us. You don't have to do any manual upgrades. There's no maintenance that has to be done on an ongoing basis. And the solution, as a SaaS solution, scales with your needs. So, if you need to extend NAC coverage to a variety of new satellite offices, or say if your company goes out and acquires another business or merges, and all of a sudden you've got twice the users and twice the devices, or 3 times the devices, we can accommodate that without any real headaches. And so for our customers, this ultimately means better productivity, better experience, and lower overall total cost of ownership. I'll stress that last one. There's no end-of-life costs. There's no ongoing maintenance costs. There's no upgrades. There's no professional services you need to bring in, things like that. So how does it work? Just a quick look at the architecture for Portnox Clear. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see a variety of different components within the system. We offer our own cloud radius server that can be basically stood up with the click of a mouse. It's very, very easy. We have F5 load balancers built in. As I said, we're auto scaling. We offer our own certificate authority, or you can use your own depending on what your needs are. We have geo distribution options, and there's ongoing, service and performance monitoring. Not to mention we are SOC 2 Type 2 certified, which I know is very critical. So in most cases, we see our customers extending clear out over access points and wired switches, so wired and Wi-Fi networks effectively, and that's covering for majority on-prem employee devices, some IoT devices, and things like that. We have some optional functionality. So should a construction team nearby cut into the cable underground or something and completely cut off your internet in that location, you'll still have a cache that you can refer to and still employ network access control in real time on the network. Through the use of our agent P, we're able to offer you continuous risk monitoring and mitigation, not only for on-prem devices, but also for employee devices, such as laptops that are being used off-prem. And we can extend that as well, not only to your wired switches and access points, but also to your remote access environments as well, such as your VPN. And again, I know we mentioned as far as authentication goes, we offer certificate authority, both our own and we accommodate others, whether you have your own. But we also offer a variety of different SSO integration options. So you can pull your directories in, such as Azure AD, G Suite, or Okta, and apply those groups that you've pre-built within those to policy set, to network access control groups within Clear, to make it a fairly seamless process and rollout. So I just want to touch on one small case study from a customer of ours. This customer actually came on board sometime early in 2020, just as COVID was kind of taking up steam. The University Federal Credit Union out of Salt Lake City, Utah, they have about 100,000 members in the Utah and I believe Nevada areas, 17 branches in operation with about 400 employees. Kind of overnight, they were forced to work from home, and because of the pandemic, and basically at that time they had no way to say monitor who was connecting in through the VPN, and let alone control their access and what they could get their hands on. So they had a very short time to kind of turn around and implement this, because again, while some IT stayed in office, most employees had gone home. So it was a little bit of the Wild West. And so, what they effectively wanted to be able to do was, as they sent everybody home with managed devices, be able to control access for those devices, both identify them, authenticate access, and ultimately, monitor risk and remediate if need be. So what we can see, here is that they extended their VPN remote access. They extended Portnox's remote access security as a service to their VPN, which helped them to basically understand who was trying to authenticate, what they were trying to access, understand the risk profiles of the devices, and remediate them in real time should they fall out of compliance, should antivirus fall out of compliance, and whatnot. They've, since the pandemic, have extended that same access control using our Agent P to their Wi-Fi, and I believe they're currently testing on their wired ports as we speak. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to open up the floor. I know we have a couple of minutes left to see if anybody had any questions. Again, feel free to post some questions in the question tab. I'm happy to answer them. I see we have a question here. So the first question, how does Portnox Clear monitor device risk and enforce compliance? It's a great question. I covered it in brief a couple of times, basically through Agent P, which is installed on the devices under management within your organization. Your network administrators or engineers who actually use Clear would set and apply their own risk policy settings for different devices. And so with that, we can automatically we can automatically quarantine or block devices if they don't fit within a specific risk scoring threshold. And, again, we'd be happy to show any of you a demo of this firsthand so you can see kind of the platform in action and how that works. Got another question here. Yeah, do we have more details on how Portnox can help meet Domain 3 cybersecurity controls within the NCUA ACET? We do. Actually, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a link there. I believe I mentioned it earlier in the presentation. Portnox.com/NCUA-ACET. You'll find a full detailed list of all the ways in which Portnox Clear matches up, either meeting or contributing a variety of cybersecurity standards laid out in the Domain 3 within the ACET. There's a lot of detail in there, a lot of granularity. Would be more than happy to schedule a session with you, any of you, one-on-one to talk through. And it looks like we have one more question too. Does Portnox work with any managed service providers that specialize in credit union security services? We do. We'd be happy to connect you with any of them, depending on where you are in the country. We have a variety of MSPs that work with credit unions that help them with various NCUA ACET audits. And should that be something that's coming up on your calendar anytime soon, we'd be more than happy to help you and consult and connect you with a partner should you need it. Well, that seems to be the end of the questions. I really appreciate everybody's time today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me via email or phone. More than happy to get you in touch with members of our solutions team if you'd like to see a demo of Portnox Clear and better understand how the the platform can meet these cybersecurity controls within Domain 3 of the ACET. And really appreciate your time today, and thank you for joining us.